Welcome to 101. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here at PAC 14. It's candidate interview time in the middle of election season, and we have our local delegate from Salisbury who represents District 37B in the General Assembly, our good friend Chris Adams. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me once again, Greg.
So how's the campaign trail out there?
Moving fast. I mean, people are voting right now.
Right.
I mean, it's mail-in ballots.
Right.
This is the first time with a organized pathway for people to ask for votes, and it's happening. You know, we'll have early voting right around the corner, and before you know it, November 7th, I think's the date. And
Right.
it's coming really fast from my eyes.
Right, early voting October 29th.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be exciting. So you represent 37B. The kind of conventional wisdom around here was that no one from Salisbury could ever get elected to 37B because it encompasses a portion of Wicomico, but it's mostly a Dorchester, Talbot, and some Caroline district. How have you managed to do such a big district?
Right. So, I mean, in 2014, when I was running the first time, there were legitimate hurdles to having a Wicomico candidate win votes in Talbot County, and I worked exceptionally hard at spending time in Talbot County, Dorchester County, Caroline County, away from home, and earning people's votes. It was my business background that people liked. It was the same time Hogan came into office as a pro-business owner wanting to make change. So the voters then liked who he was, certainly liked who I was. And this is my third try at being a delegate. So I'm 2 terms, 8 years in, and I can tell you that the work hasn't changed. The work still is predominantly Dorchester and Talbot. And with redistricting, I pick up now a larger part of Caroline County and lost some of Wicomico County. I think the percentages are about 11% of the district is now Wicomico. And to that end, you have to, as an elected representative for this district, view it as the entire 37B, not I'm from Wicomico, and really aim to represent. With Johnny Mouts moving forward, he was from Talbot County. You know, there's going to be some additional responsibility to make sure Talbot has representation that looks and is local. And my experience working the district for 8 years will serve Talbot County and Dorchester County well. I'm anxious to get on board in January.
You have really made a reputation as an advocate for small business, both in terms of growing small business and keeping over-regulation from happening. What are some of your accomplishments during that time working with Governor Hogan?
So Hogan was a pro-business, governor. His administration's Department of Labor, Department of Commerce really took a different tact. It was no longer about finding ways to punish and fine businesses, but rather give them clear paths to compliance with laws, working to give them information, not necessarily a fine to levy on them. So in that background, I serve on Economic Matters Committee, where we do have legislation coming forward. And all I've ever asked in 8 years is if we're going to pass a bill, make it workable, give the businesses a chance to comply with the law. And that work in concert with a pro-business governor has been very effective. These next 4 years will be different, but to your question, and where I found success was finding a governor who was very conservative with spending. You know, the budgets were always very easy to vote for. Also finding in these administrations with cabinet secretaries who had a true interest in the Eastern Shore and also to the economic growth and development of Maryland as a whole, which can't just be how much work can we get from Washington, D.C. for the benefit of Montgomery and Prince George's. It has to really be a holistic state conversation about agriculture, about our watermen, tourism, Ocean City. And so we have found great success.
Yeah, one of the things about 37B, it's and I've said this a couple times now, it's like the epitome of the Eastern Shore. It's really, in terms of industry, dominated by the farmers and the watermen.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so Talbot County, Dorchester County, a lot of waterfront, a lot of watermen communities, Tillman, Hooper's Island, Taylor's Island, and Wicomico, Nanticoke. So all these areas really demand the attention of a pro-business legislator who's willing to listen, also understanding that Chesapeake Bay is a treasure and that it needs to be protected, and so within reasonable confines of regulation, how do we do those without completely destroying the basis for our economy? Everything that the state of Maryland counts on a state level, $2.1 billion worth of economic development happens because of agriculture and seafood. And so every industry that falls under that in the Eastern Shore, it starts with agriculture. And we've got to make sure we protect the key industries that then lead to other business development opportunities that happen on the shore. And that job, whether you're from Talbot or whether you're from Wacomico, is one and the same, because it's truly an Eastern Shore conversation. It's one from Cecil County down to Somerset. We all have the same complaints. We all have the same opportunities to work in the General Assembly, and therefore do it in a way that hopefully we change minds and halt the very worst that can come from ill-advised legislation, and do it to the benefit of people who work, live, and enjoy life here on the shore.
It seems to me, as a reporter, there's less conflict over the overregulation than there used to be. It's like the different sides know how the process is going to go, and maybe they do all end up at the table together.
Well, that's the job in Annapolis. If you really get to it, in our committees, I'm on economic matters, there's environment and transportation. Most of these committees have a very deliberative process. There's an incorporation of minority viewpoints, a place for a person like me with a business background to say, look, I understand where you're coming from on this particular bill, but here's how it is going to hurt, and then we modify it. And if we're doing a good job in Annapolis, if there's a good work product, I may or may not vote for it on the House floor, but at least it came out of our committee, workable. And to the challenge that's ahead, there's going to be tremendous turnover in January. A lot of Republicans have moved up. A lot of Democrats have resigned, moved up as well. So we're going to have well over a third of the House of Delegates turn over. In these next 4 years, I think at least for the first year or two, is going to be a question of, will there be well-vetted legislation? Will be able to work with the new incoming folks that are coming in the majority position? And that's the challenge set before us, because you're right, after these 8 years, it's been a terrific opportunity to meet people of different viewpoints and then develop working relationships with those people. Now it starts over again. I have the experience of 8 years coming in, learning how to work with everybody, and that we'll have to leverage that. We'll have to leverage that for the benefit of the Eastern Shore, to be able to get in front of new faces and have these conversations over again.
As a Republican, your tenure has matched Larry Hogan's. With him gone now, and right now, if you trust the polls, it looks like Wes Moore is probably going to be our next governor. So you're going to have to work with a Democrat that doesn't really have the rapport with the General Assembly, because he doesn't really come from politics the same way. So how are you going to position yourself? What are you going to do to get his attention and work with him?
Thank you for the question, because it's one that I think about often, and clearly my party was having a national conversation. I'm not sure that it was a Maryland conversation. It's not Montgomery County, Alabama, it's Montgomery County, Maryland. And so there are practical realities about having a Republican win the governor's race. So your question really gets to, what does the General Assembly, what does the House of Delegates and the Senate really do, and how do they work well or not so well with the executive branch of government? And let me just answer it like this. We, as the House of Delegates, are very proud of the work that we do. We stand as one of 3 pillars of government, and in many cases it may not be, it doesn't matter who the governor is, stand uniquely situated to make decisions on our own. The better question is, if we're going to have a Democrat governor, how is that Democrat going to work with the Democrat leadership? Are they going to find, like they had under the O'Malley administration, which was deep divisions over what we were going to do, how we were going to go about it? Because I got to tell you, I think over the past 8 years, while there were certainly flashpoints and differences, I think the Hogan administration and the House of Delegates on key points worked exceptionally well together. And really, the differences brought together better policy making. So, we'll have to see. It really does come down to the personality of the leader, who the executive is. Are they going to want to make their stamp on the state of Maryland? Or are they going to do it free of understanding the political realities of what lawmaking looks like? Who knows? I really don't know that. Very important for me as a Republican in that environment to make sure that we defend our turf on the Eastern Shore, because we've gained so much over the past 8 years, winning these conversations, making sure that agriculture, our poultry industry, stand firm as leading our economic charge on the shore. And that to me is one of the greatest challenges, making sure that economic growth continues to thrive under what we know are going to be some very difficult economic times coming forward. So, yeah.
Compared to a lot of the other Republican lawmakers that I deal with, you seem to have a real appreciation for public education.
You know, my wife's a teacher, and my daughter just came in, and so by definition, I care. My 3 kids went to public school, so I've seen public education work well. I respect the amount of time that teachers put in. I also respect the difficulties over the past handful of years to educate children from, basically a computer screen, which frankly was not workable. It's just, we're going to have many years of difficulties moving forward. But I think that being one of the top requirements of taxpayer dollars for funding, I think we do want to have dynamic conversations between teachers and parents, administrations. We want to make sure we maintain that. I'm a little worried that through Kerwin and this new program that's coming through the next few years, that as it becomes a greater financial hurdle for local counties, are we going to be able to fund it without overburdening the taxpayer? But most importantly, will the citizens feel like they are engaged in the process of teaching their children? Will it look and feel like local decision making as it should be, or will over time policies be driven from top down, from Annapolis and from far? And I think we know, living here on the Eastern Shore, we like self-determination, we like to be independent, and look, I think we have in local leadership great faces, great people who understand the community and are willing to listen in and advocate. So as a dad, as a legislator, certainly education is so important. It's what helps our region and our state and our nation, frankly, grow and expand, having qualified young people learning the tools of the trade, learning to do what it takes to be successful in college, higher education. All these things start from kindergarten on up.
These school board meetings have become like battlegrounds, and I thought maybe it's just particular to one county, Worcester. You saw it there first, but it's coming to Wicomico now. It's in all the counties. A lot of school superintendents are resigning because of the stress from that environment. What's behind it all?
Right. Well, so this goes back to what I was saying before, is that our party, the Republican Party, is clearly having national conversations. Whether they apply to Wicomico County or not is secondary to the idea that for these past couple of years, there have been real concerns about the work product coming from some of these school systems, and more importantly, are the citizens able to engage and make difference with the local boards of education? Our local board of education, from my vantage point, has done a terrific job, has done as good a job as you could possibly imagine under environments that are almost impossible to manage. The administrations, how we're handling teaching children who are coming back into a public setting, we're trying to understand, are they able to work well together? Are they resolving conflict with one another? Those are things where, if you really look at it from a federal level and the issues that relate to a child's entitlement to having education, at some point you need to be able to control a classroom. And those are things that I think create the most frustration in education. Is you want kids to wake up in the morning excited to walk into the classroom, ready to learn. Of course, the reality is that's not always how it is. And now I think we're having to go into the basics, which is our kids in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, learning how to deal with one another in a public setting. Are they willing to listen to the teacher as an authority figure? That's what I remember when I was a kid.
Right.
That respect for teachers and the administration, I think we need to reassert that, and it may be government that has to help make sure that the classrooms have the conduct and the behavior that lead to good educational outcomes. If administrators are quitting, if superintendents are quitting, it's because they've lost their ability to feel like they can make a difference in the environment that they're being handed. That's not money.
Right.
In fact, I'd say very few teachers would say truly that money is the solution to the problems that exist within the classroom. It's more about, can I have my classroom back? Can we get rid of the regulatory red tape, and can we do the job that we came out of college and have worked so many years in this system to make a difference in a child's life? Can we actually do that? And we'll get there. Ultimately, I think that this issue that has driven like Loudoun County conversations on school boards that have translated nationally, these things get sorted out, but only if the parent and the boards of education have the ability to make a difference, for which in Wicomico we vote these folks in, and I'll leave it at that for now.
So give us your 1-minute pitch. Why should the constituents of District 37B re-elect Chris Adams?
I am experienced. I have done a great job over the 8 years learning under Addie Eckhart, who was my mentor, and of course she won't be back, but you know, the job of making sure that the Eastern Shore is represented with a voice that, yes, I can fight and I can scrap, and I do so on the House floor, but I'm a voice that can be heard. So when I speak on the House floor, as a rule of thumb, people listen in. I'm concise, I say what I need to say, and in committee I do get work done, and it has taken a long time to develop not only the relationships but also the behaviors that you need to be able to exhibit when you're working across the aisle. Those are things over the next 4 years that voters are going to want to see from my party. They're going to want to see it from all elected officials, especially with change at the governor's level and how we're going to assert our position, not only you know, locally here, but also global policy for the state of Maryland, public safety, education. To your point, these things happen because you've got people like me that care, that we want to be in the office, that we're here for the right reasons. I believe for all those things that I chose to run, that I wanted to run for another term, and it's a humble ask of voters to you know, have me come back and do this work as respectfully as I can.
He's Chris Adams. He's our sitting delegate in 37B. He's running for re-election, and we're thrilled he had time to be here today. Thanks, Chris, for being here.
Thanks for having me once again.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Be sure and watch all the candidate interviews on the PAC 14 YouTube page.